Admiral Shekhar Sinha, Dr. Satoru Nagao, Major General G.D. Bakshi, Dr. Roger Kangas, Dr. Amit Gupta, participants and friends. Welcome to a very special webinar on Quad in Tokyo and the way forward. Before I start, let me briefly introduce NICE. Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement is an independent, apolitical, and non-partisan think tank registered under the Companies Act 2006 of Nepal. It undertakes independent research activities on issues of international relations, foreign policy, security studies, and issues of development. NICE focus on 8 research topics, out of which Indo-Pacific affairs is one of the significant one. In last 2 years, we have had more than 30 discussions on Indo-Pacific affairs. To chair today's session, we have with us Admiral Shekhar Sinha. Admiral Shekhar Sinha was Chief of Integrated Defense Staff and commissioned on 1st June 1974 as a combat pilot in the Indian Navy. Vice Admiral Sinha has had a distinguished career. He has been conferred upon the 2 Gallantry Award, one during action in Sri Lanka against terror group. He retired from service as the head of India's Western Naval Command, considered the sword arm of Indian Navy. He commanded 2 Sea Harrier Squadrons as well as Air Station Hansa. Admiral Sinha has commanded the first Saryu-class patrol vessel, INS Saryu, the Deepak-class fleet tanker, INS Shakti, and the guided missile destroyer, INS Delhi in 2012. Vice Admiral Sinha was appointed Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Western Naval Command, Ashore as a Flag Officer. He served as a Flag Officer Naval Aviation, Assistant Chief of Naval Staff Air, as well as Controller Personal Service. As a Rear Admiral, Sinha served as a Flag Officer commanding Western Fleet from 2007 to 2008. In a short stint in 2011, he served as the 6th Chief of Integrated Defense Staff. He is Trustee of India Foundation and is one of the Governing Council of MP-IDSA, USI, Indian Council of World Affairs, Policy Perspective Foundation, the Sunday Guardian Foundation, Deepstrat, and on the editorial board of the Eurasian Times. Admiral Sinha, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Nepal Institute of International Cooperation and Engagement, for inviting us. And hopefully we will have a very useful discussion. I'm quite humbled with this invitation because I've got such distinguished speakers on the panel. Sharing a panel with them is really an honor for me. What I'll do is I'll just make a short introduction, very short introduction to all my distinguished speakers before I kick off, so that we don't have to do that. And I'm not going to make a great introduction. It's all there in the bio data, which has been circulated to, I guess, to everybody. We have Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a visiting fellow at Hudson, and he's in a very large number of institutions, either visiting or engaged in doing these discussions. He's been a lieutenant in the Japan Self-Defense Forces long back. And importantly, that he's a very dear friend of mine. We just met him during Raisina at Delhi. Then, of course, General Bakshi, I think he's not there at the moment. He's my senior from the Indian Army, and he was my so-called, in Hindi, we call him Guru. He's my Guru, so therefore I need not say much on that. Dr. Roger Kangas from NISA in Washington, another dear friend, a very, very distinguished, shall I say, a think tanker at the NDU. We have met a couple of times. The last one I recall was in Durham, many years ago, on the Gulf security and security of Western Indian Ocean. Dr. Amit Gupta, he's at the USAF War College, and he's again a very distinguished thinker, a professor there. Recently, I was in the audience when he spoke to one Indian forum, and he called it Quad -1. So I will, I'll leave it at that, because he will be doing a fair amount of talking and a lot of rational thinking there. What I'll do is I'm not going to be talking very much about all the aspects of Quad, because all my distinguished speakers on the panel will do that, except to say that it has made a lot of progress, leaps and bounds, if I may use this term. Within 1 year, they have had 4 conferences, 2 of them in person, last one being 24th of May in Tokyo. And it will continue. And I think that it's a very good development. We will see how it progresses. It talked about increasing cooperation in making infrastructure, maybe providing an alternate mechanism to BRI, and they have committed nearly $50 billion in next 5 years. We're talking about peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, in the post-pandemic world. And then we talked about climate change, we talked about vaccine, talked about many, many things really. But what I'll just talk about is I'll talk about the Indo-Pacific cooperation on the maritime domain awareness. It is a very important, shall I say, cooperative mechanism, which if it is put in place, which it will be, then it has got the potential of likelihood of some kind of security architecture for the Quad. Because right now, we do not have a joint mechanism where all the vessels in the entire Indo-Pacific can be seen on one sort of scope, on one sort of data platform. Right now, the Indian Ocean has got a fusion center in Gurugram, very close to Delhi. Then we have in South China Sea and that part of Pacific in Singapore, and one we have in Solomon Island, which actually looks after a very large part of Pacific. It is run and steered by Australia. The plan is to link them all through satellite network and have the position of all the vessels known in the entire Indo-Pacific, which can be accessed selectively by the countries around their own coastal waters and the seas around them. And therefore, if they find any illegal activity in their own area, they can take action accordingly, either a diplomatic protest after identifying the vessel, or possibly, even to reach them by the fastest means and ask them to stop doing what they're doing. Right now, it has been said that it will actually be keeping a check on IUU fishing, as all our viewers and listeners will know, that China contributes to 95% of illegal fishing all over in the world. So it's a very large number, and we all know that the fishing fleet of China is not only fishing fleet, it is actually a militia. It has got the surveillance equipment, it has got the communication equipment, and it passes information, very critical information, including those on the warships and submarines plying in these areas back to their own command control. They're all paid by the government, they are on the payroll, and they're very much linked with the PLA Navy. So I would think that an MDA is the first step before you can do some law enforcement. And for law enforcement, it is necessary to know who is where and who's engaged in illegal activity. The capability of using the space-based assets and technology, which will be given to all these countries in Indo-Pacific, even the dark shipping can be, tracked. Dark shipping meaning those who switch off their automatic information system, just to hide their location. But if you switch it off, then you stand out as one who has switched off. So it's not really helped very much. I saw that at sea, and we practiced it once in a while. And therefore, once you have identified these illegal or law-breaking contacts of the vessels, then you are talking about some method of enforcement. And that is why I say that this has the potential of turning into some kind of security architecture, where not only will you find out as to who's engaged in illegal activity, but then the next step is that you must have mechanism of enforcing it. Otherwise, knowing somebody is doing illegal activity is not good enough. And I would say that this is the one which has got a fair amount of security potential. And all those people who were saying that there is no security angle, I think they will have to think twice before they make that statement. And what I'll do is, I'm not going to go beyond this, and I'll just stop it here, and then I invite my speakers one by one in the same sequence as I gave their short introduction, beginning with Dr. Nagao. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, sir. It is a great honor to speak under the chair, Admiral Sinha, and at the same time in front of you, the audiences, high-level audiences. Thank you very much. My presentation is perspective from Tokyo, and this time the Quad meeting 2022 was organized by the Japanese government, so as a host. So that's why the view from Japan, this is quite success. Indeed, in Japan's perception, Japan was a pioneer in the creating the concept of the both Quad and Indo-Pacific designation. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's speech in the Indian Parliament in 2007, entitled "Conference of Two Seas," introduced this idea. Indeed, in this address, he did not use the Quad or Indo-Pacific, these words exactly. But when we check the contents of the address, he mentioned about what he is thinking. Indeed, view from his address, when we check what is the Quad of significances, there are three significances. Because of the rapid economic development, both Pacific side and Indian Ocean region side, increasingly emerge as the influential region in the world politics. So that's why what happened in the Indo-Pacific, the impact will spread to the world. That means this region is very important. But this region is under threat. The rising Indo-Pacific should not be China-dominated region. That's why he needs a Quad and Indo-Pacific. Especially Quad is very important because when we check the Quad is a group of influential countries in the Indo-Pacific. But all influential countries in the Indo-Pacific is included as a Quad, except China. So that's why the Quad is a very counterbalancer against China. And to cooperate with India is in this case most important. This is the third significance of the Quad. India is the most important. Why? Because when we talk about the difference between Asia-Pacific and Indo-Pacific, which region is the difference? The Asia-Pacific do not include Indian Ocean region. That's why Indo-Pacific focusing on Indian Ocean region. And Quad is also, if the US cooperate with Japan and India, Japan and Australia both are US allies. That's why there are plenty of the chances to cooperate. But if these countries want to cooperate with India, in this case, they need a Quad. Japan needs a Quad. That's why this is a very important feature of the Quad and Indo-Pacific. So why Japan focusing on Quad? Because of these three reasons. So view from these three reasons, the Quad Summit 2022 is just one step to achieve the final goal. Final goal is Quad will be the real counterbalance against China in this region, and the Quad will be decisive group in the order in the Indo-Pacific. So one by one, we need to step up to the goal. So in this case, 2022, the summit has happened in Tokyo, and they have some achievement as a one step. And indeed, in my observation, there are three steps. Three achievements. First achievement was mending the rift. What kind of the rift is exists? Indeed, since Russia's aggression in Ukraine, we can find the rift between Japan, US, Australia, and India. Indeed, Japan, US, Australia stand with Ukraine, but India need to care about Russia. So Quad is needed against China, but because when we talk about Russia, there is a rift. But when we check the difference between China and Russia as a threat, China is rich, Russia is poor. So in this case, in the long run, the counter-China strategy is very important. This means that Russia matter should not be the cause of problem, cause of rift between the countries in Quad. So we need to overcome. So when we check the joint statement of the Quad 2022, Quad Summit 2022, there are some sentences. We discuss our respective response to the conflict in Ukraine, and we strongly oppose any coercive, provocative, or unilateral actions that seek to change the status quo. So this is 2 sentences in the joint statement. Indeed, this is art of diplomacy. The statement indicates that both sides can agree. Both sides means Japan, US, Australia, and India. View from the Japan, US, Australia, they can understand this statement criticizes Russia's aggression in Ukraine because there is word of Ukraine. But India can understand this statement did not criticize Russia because there is no word of Russia. So that is one kind of the art of this diplomacy. First achievement. So to maintain Quad, this is good. Secondly, the second achievement was Indo-Pacific Economic Forum. Indo-Pacific Economic Forum is not a direct topic in the Quad Summit, but a related topic and a very important part. Indeed, core part, we can say. Because China's problem is problem of money. Why China can modernize their military so rapid pace? Because they have ample budget. China's infrastructure project under the Belt and Road Initiative, which create a huge depots in the recipient to control the recipient. That kind of project depend on money, ample budget. So because country rely on market in China, China can be arrogant. They can impose economic sanction. Recent example is when Australia asked the international community to investigate origin of the COVID-19, China tried to delay the products from Australia, delay the import the products from Australia, such as the wine, the lobsters. Why such kind of things has happened? Because Australia rely on the market in China. So China can be arrogant because the country depend on China. So in this case, we need alternative market. Establishing alternative market is very important. Indo-Pacific Economic Forum could be such market. And this market should be led by the United States because the US lead, many countries follow. And this market should not include China because this is a counter-China market. If China involved, this is not a counter-China. And including India is very important because India's market is a very big market as an alternative market, which is a market in China. Involving India is very important. But Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, IPEF, fulfill all conditions. So leading by the US, excluding China, and including India. That's why this is very important achievement. Third achievement was security. If China believes the Quad is a military alliance and need to attack, India could be first target. Because India is only country to share the land border with China, easy to access. When China attack Japan, they need to go through the sea and attack Japan. The United States, Australia, far from China. So, but India shares a land border with China, more easy to access. So that's why India wants to be low profile in the security cooperation in the Quad Summit. It is understandable. But bilaterally, India can cooperate with other Quad members militarily. That's why the US, India, arms trade has progressed a lot. And so security cooperation is, recently the security cooperation is progress in the bilateral basis, not the quadrilateral basis. But this time, a little different. The Admiral Sinha already mentioned some. Indeed, when we check the joint statement of the Quad 2022 summit, the sharing satellite information, maritime information is included in the agreement. This sharing satellite information or sharing maritime information is dual use cooperation, both military and civil purpose. And another one is they agreed establishment of the Quad partnership on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief in the Indo-Pacific. This is humanitarian assistance or disaster relief. This is armed force cooperation, because humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, which organization cooperate each other? Armed forces. So that's why this time the Quad Summit 2022, as clearly mentioned, armed force cooperation, even if this they do not emphasize the military part of this summit. So built from this, this summit, Quad 2022, is successful summit. Of course, as a one step, not achieve the whole goal, but as a one step, we achieved, we have done well, Japan think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nagao, nearly finished in time. And that's a good point you made, both the economic forum and ending with the military one. Sorry, you did mention about Ukraine, as you would have noticed that India's external affairs minister was at pains to explain everywhere. As to Indo-Pacific, we have limited ourselves to affairs of the oceans, and we haven't talked about the continental issues which are going on. However, he has also mentioned in the official documents, and we feel here back in India, that it has not been taken very well, and the war should be brought to halt immediately, and humanitarian assistance should be provided. So I think there is much of diplomatic words used there, not to offend Russia probably. At the same time, not that it has been appreciated very well. So thank you, Dr. Nagao, for bringing that point. May I now invite Dr. Roger. Roger, 10 minutes is okay, 10, 12 minutes, followed by Dr. Gupta. I don't see General Bakshi here as yet. So Roger, you have it.
Okay, thank you very much. And I am, happy to go now. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for putting this event together and to be part of such a distinguished group. Sir, you as well. So, my remarks I'll keep, as you said, in the 10 to 12 minutes. And the purpose is not to replay the sort of history of the US with the Quad, but rather, where do I see as some of the challenges ahead? And I'm really pleased that Dr. Nagao did a wonderful job in outlining different aspects going beyond just the security dynamic. And I think that framing is critical for us. Look at a couple of key points here. First is, the issue of Indo-Pacific. If we're thinking it again from an American perspective, and I should say these are my views, not that of National Defense University, the NISA Center, the US government. But I should say, when I look at the Indo-Pacific, this is a term and an idea that has been evolving in the US. It's not new. The Biden administration has not, sort of presented this as a new approach to the region, but really it's part of a process that, some will say it starts with Barack Obama and his so-called pivot to Asia. I can look back to previous administrations, both the Presidents Bush's and as well as President Clinton, all talked about the primacy of the Pacific region. And as correctly noted, we often said, Asia Pacific. Now we're transitioning to this concept of Indo-Pacific. It is, from a security perspective, the #1 theater or combatant command for the United States. There are more US troops abroad in the Indo-Pacific region than in any other region. Now, it's interesting to say this because after 20 years of having wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have tended to put the Central Command region as the primary military space. That period is over, and we really are looking at the Indo-Pacific region. So it's a concept, by the way, that stretches all the way to the coast of Africa and the Arabian Gulf and other areas. Although I would say from an American perspective, we tend to still think of the Pacific and then slowly getting into the Indian Ocean as a secondary region. I think that's still an ongoing process. Looking at the notion of a free and open Indo-Pacific, this concept of transportation links, maritime rules of engagement, it's interesting, this is often framed in a combative way. Hearing Chinese speakers and reading articles by individuals who oppose this notion or feel that it's part of a way to control or contain, the free and open Indo-Pacific space really is about legal rules. It's about rules of the sea, so to speak. It's about ethical and moral behavior in this region. It's about commercial trade. And it's interesting, it's actually a concept probably developed or articulated earlier by Japan and India. I would say the American perspective probably securitized it a bit more than the other two. And I simply look at it as a way where the 4 states in the Quad, let's bring in Australia, will find ways to look at this space. Now, the Quad itself, I would actually highlight to colleagues on this call to look at the presentations of Secretary of Defense Austin and Admiral Aquilino, who's the head of Indo-PACOM, who both spoke at the Shangri-La Dialogue not too long ago, the other week. And it's interesting, both of them framed this, and actually Prime Minister Kishida from Japan also noted that this is not a military alliance. Rather, it's an association of like-minded countries who have common interest in the region that go beyond security. In fact, they discuss, and we saw this in the recent Tokyo meetings, 6 different working groups, on climate, on COVID, emerging technologies, cyber, space, and infrastructure. Looking holistically at how these states with ample budgets and the ability not just to project security power, but economic power, how they can participate with partners in the region. Now, I look at this, and of course, the immediate reaction is it's seen as a way to contain China. It's seen as a way to limit China. The irony here is if China were to play by the rules, if China respected the UN UNCLOS, if China followed proper practices in the region, it would actually be seen as a potential partner, or at least a country that could work with Quad states. It does not have to be adversarial, but sadly it is often framed that way. In fact, when I look at this organization, I also see Quad states engaging with countries like Singapore, Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia, of course, the Republic of Korea. So this is not simply, a small clique opposing one country. Rather, it's a way to look at the region as a whole. And just to close up, when I look at this organization, I do see some challenges. And I would like to raise these and then, happy to answer and follow these up in our discussion. First, of course, is cohesion. What do we do when there are differences? And we've seen these, between the India-US, Japan, US, Australia has its perspectives. I think the summit, the meetings we saw, on May 24th, showed that there are ways to walk through and talk through these differences. But down the road, we will find, continued efforts in any form of structure where parties have to come together and work with each other. Secondly, is regional buy-in. All countries have priorities. India has its priorities. The US has its priorities. Let's also remember the priorities of states in the region who are not Quad members. Do they see this as a positive force in the region, or do they see it as a potential source of friction in the Indo-Pacific and potentially a side or a belligerent in a bigger conflict, even if it's not a military conflict? We need to somehow tamper down those negative perceptions. Thirdly, from the US side, our own internal dynamics. I think, as all of you know who follow and watch US domestic politics, but also our foreign priorities, we do change. We have administration changes. Sometimes it can be chaotic. I know the perception that the US is mercurial or the US is a fair weather friend can come up because administrations come in and reprioritize our foreign engagement. I actually see whoever comes in, say, in the White House in 2025, whether Biden continues or it's another presidency, I actually see the emphasis on the Indo-Pacific region remain. The 21st century is an Asian century, and I do see the US looking in that direction, but that's something to think about. And then just lastly, and fourth, crises elsewhere. I'm glad the issue of Ukraine was brought up. This has taken a lot of attention by US officials, and I can imagine officials in other countries. It's not just Ukraine. If there's a crisis in the Middle East or a crisis elsewhere, the broad perspective is the Indo-Pacific region is important, but the US does seem to get dragged into other regions. Think of the Afghanistan departure last August, think of the continued challenges with Iran, and on and on. And so for the US to close, rhetorically, we're there. Rhetorically, the Indo-Pacific region is important, and the Quad is an essential vehicle to put our engagement in the region on paper, so to speak. The challenge is to make this operationally successful, to actually carry out actions that match this rhetoric. With that, sir, I'll turn the microphone back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Raja. I think it's a good thing that you have reminded the participants that it is very much a forum anything other than a security partnership. Absolutely right. That is how the definition is. Important point is that when the friction between the world order, the existing world order, and China's belligerence was forming up, it was said very often that the countries in the ASEAN or Southeast Asia, they will have to choose sides, and they will choose for economic partnership. They will choose China because of their indulgence in the trade with all those countries, and for security, they would still like to lean on US. So here, what is happening now with the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, an alternate economic forum or framework is being made available, where the countries who were totally intertwined with the Chinese as far as economy is concerned, they have an option to gradually move on to this platform. And I hope it grows up to that bigger forum where it provides a real alternate to decoupling from Chinese economy, so that they have more freedom as far as supply chain is concerned. They have more freedom as far as the the manufacturing bases are concerned. They're a little more free from China as far as so many other things are concerned, which I'm sure that it will come up in the discussion. I wouldn't like to go beyond this. So thank you, Raja. That was really very, very, very important points you made. May I now invite Dr. Amit Gupta to take on the floor and make his presentation. 10, 12 minutes. If I don't see General Bakshi so far, if he's here, then of course, otherwise you can continue speaking for longer.
Well, thank you, Admiral Sinha. And I'd forgotten you were in the audience when I gave that talk about not a quad, but a 3+1, which I'll get to in a minute. Yeah, I'll try and stick to 12 minutes, but if General Bakshi is not here, I'll go on a little bit longer. What I'm going to talk about today is essentially why the quad doesn't make sense in a military context, why it could make sense in an economic context, an educational context, a healthcare context, a cybersecurity context. And let me explain this. The quad is a misnomer. You really should call it the 3+1, because if you look at the United States, Japan, and Australia, they share the same technologies, they share the same intelligence, they share all kinds of things. And if a Japanese officer can speak English, you can put him on an American Aegis class destroyer or an Australian destroyer, and he would fit in seamlessly, just as an Australian would fit in on an American destroyer. Not so with an Indian officer, and not so with an American officer on an Indian warship. By my estimates, if there's a lot of big talk that comes out of Washington about India, quad partner, etc., except when the rubber hits the road, what is offered is very measly. So let me say this. I think if you want India to be a serious partner, you have to understand India has developmental constraints. It'll always put butter before guns. And therefore, you have to heavily subsidize the remilitarization of India to make it fit into the quad seamlessly. I think that's about $50 billion. Given that $50 billion is being given to this futile exercise called Ukraine, it's better to give it to the Indians, because the Indians, unlike the Australians, and I may sadly add the Japanese, do have the capacity to fight the Chinese. And let's be clear here, this is about the Chinese. We can pussyfoot around and call it about security in the Indian Ocean and visiting Kenya. No, it's not about that. Now, why is this a problem? One, let us take the Australians. The Australians are heavily casualty averse. They lost 2 people in Iraq. One was rolled over by a truck. The second was an accidental weapons discharge. And Admiral Sinha, I'm sure you know what an accidental weapons discharge really is. Okay. In Afghanistan, they lost 40. 10 went down in a Sea King helicopter. These people can't fight a war. I've talked to the Deputy Chief of the Australian Air Staff, and he said the southern coast of Indonesia, Malaysia is our strategic orbit. It's not the South China Sea, despite all these nuclear submarines they're getting from the United States or Britain, whoever it is. Second thing about the Australians you have to keep in mind is they're deeply entrenched with China. They have $170 billion in trade with the Chinese, and I'll show that in a minute. So where are they going to go? And third, they only have an army of 70,000 people. It's a pity General Bakshi is not here, because he and I could have laughed about this. And they essentially talk about 3 battalions, 1 being operational outside the country. Now, let us say the Australians were to give a battalion to the Indian Army to put on the Himalaya. Oh, there is General Bakshi. To put on the Himalaya to fight the Chinese. The Indian Army would say, could you guys please stand at the back while we do our business, because you're only going to get in the way. And by the way, the joke about the Australians in Washington is at the Eisenhower School is that they're good for running the bar. This is not a serious military country, okay? And Roger should know this because he's also at NDU, but this is the joke at Eisenhower. Then we come to Japan, and I need to share the screen for a minute. Pramod, can you give me access here, please? All right, I think I have it. Here we go. If you look at this, this gives you the demographic transition in Western states. Australia goes from a population of 24 million to 28 million. Its median age goes from 33 to 37. But look at what happens to the Japanese. And my argument has always been the Japanese are too old to fight. They go from 126 million to 170 million in 107 million in 2050. The median age is 46.5. 2030, it goes up to 50. 2050, it goes up to 53. 50-year-old men and women do not make good soldiers. They can be used to guard a building because nobody can steal that, but they can't be used for combat operations. And I think you need to keep this in mind. And just to take this one step further, let me get to the next slide in this, just so that, there we go. Here we go. This is what Japan's population pyramid looks like, okay? And these are the figures from the US Census Bureau, so I'm not making this up to make an argument. If you look at 2025, which is 3 years away, the bulk of Japan's population is between 45 and 80. 45 to 80-year-old people don't fight wars. And look at how few young people there are. Wars are fought by people between the age of 18 to 25. Japan is not going to be able to wage a land war. And I've always said this to the Europeans who talk about remilitarization. Your idea of remilitarization is to defend Holland from Vladimir Putin or Portugal from Vladimir Putin. It's not about going and fighting on Russian soil. It's worth asking young Japanese, do you want to fight in Taiwan? Do you want to fight in mainland China? And you may get a very different answer on this. I'd also be very interested to find out if Shinzo Abe can actually get Japan to nuclearize. In contrast, look at India. This is India's population pyramids. India remains a very young country. And I will remind everybody here, unlike the Australians, and I'm afraid to say this because I'm a big fan of Japan, unlike Japan, the Indians take casualties. The Indians have twice stood up to the Chinese and said, you want a war, let's have a war. They did that at Doklam, they did that at Galwan. They didn't back down. So this is the question, point that you need to keep in mind. The other thing is, look at how young the non-Western world is. And I'm not going to get into that. You can take a quick look at that slide. And now let me get to, so the military construct just isn't there. Here's your problem with the economic construct. These are China's major trading partners. Again, I didn't make up these numbers. These numbers were made by the European Union's Directorate of Trade. 724 billion for ASEAN, 645 billion for the EU, 568 billion for the United States, 330 billion for Japan, 174 billion for Australia. This is the very high level of economic interdependence that the Chinese have created. And if you seriously want to put a hole in this, and I think you should, you then should not talk in terms of 50 billion. 50 billion is nothing. China's bilateral trade with a country that it has 50 billion in trade with does not even make the list of the top 10 countries. Please keep that in mind, okay? You need to talk about 500 billion over a period of 5 years. And the US needs to talk seriously about investing in this. But Roger's point is a valid one in this. Donald Trump first came out against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So Hillary Clinton, who was a globalist until she found out she was going to lose the election, decided to also be anti-TPP. I am not sure that you can come up with an economic plan for the Indo-Pacific, which is going to play that well in the United States. Trade unions, all kinds of other groups are going to come out against this. So the question is, can you do it? And I'm just stop my slides and end this very quickly for all of you. Look, 3 quick things. What can you do? First, if somebody has the courage, I would put together $500 billion. 2, India, the United States, Japan, Australia are all educational powerhouses. Why not create a new educational order for the Indo-Pacific, which brings Kenyans and Kazakhs and God knows who else you want in? Because right now the Chinese are the ones giving away scholarships to people from around the world. This needs to be countered. Second thing is, you can have a quad health order. India is a vaccine giant. Give India the resources that it can produce 1 billion vaccines a year. Let us remember there's close to 8 billion people in the world, which means you need 24 billion vaccines so that everybody can be triple vaccinated. The Indians can do it, other countries can't. And as part of this, it's a very good question to ask why the Indian Covaxin has not been authorized by the World Health Organization or the US Food and Drug Administration even though it is a much better vaccine than that shoddy Chinese vaccine, and it's less complicated than Sputnik, which is really two different vaccines, just so you know. And the other thing you can work on is cybersecurity, as Roger talked about and Admiral Sinha, I think you also alluded to. Cybersecurity between these countries makes a lot of sense because they're all vulnerable to it. The Chinese do it, the Russians do it in terms of attacks. Lastly, I'm sick and tired of hearing, oh, the Chinese could be such wonderful stakeholders. They don't want to be stakeholders. My take on this one is, boys and girls, make them an offer they can't refuse. When Dominic Strauss-Kahn disgraced himself in the IMF and he was kicked out, the Chinese said, why not make a non-Westerner the head of the IMF and the World Bank? And the idea being floated was a Chinese could head the IMF and Indian could head the World Bank. That was turned down by the Europeans who monopolized the IMF. So the current leader of the IMF is a Bulgarian. So tell me, how does a country of 7 million people, which is so tiny that it doesn't matter even in Europe, is running the IMF, and China, which is the second largest economy in the world, or the largest, depending on whose calculations you look at, is not even asked to come in and run the organization? If you want to talk about China as a stakeholder, then you have to start making those offers to it. So let me sum up by saying this very quickly. The Indians will fight. You need to help India remilitarize and stop trying to sell the Indians weapons at market prices. You're giving away weapons to the Ukrainians. Why not give a good deal to the Indians? And two, when you sell aircraft, because this seems to be the only thing that anybody's interested in buying in India, for reasons which completely puzzle me, I would say buy submarines, but that's a different story. Ask the United States, Britain, etc., do we have the right to use your aircraft to carry nuclear weapons? Because that fits into India's nuclear doctrine. And if you can't carry nuclear weapons, then sorry, we'll buy from the French and the Russians. It's time to make India into a valued partner, much in the way as you treat Israel, much in the way as you treat Britain. Second, Japan, Australia, talk about an economic agenda for the Indo-Pacific, because those countries would appreciate an economic and educational agenda. Thank you. That was 12.5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Amit Gupta. I think, as always, you have made points and backed with so much of data that one can always go back and revisit and start thinking about very seriously what you have said. And I quite agree with you that education, vaccine, and cybersecurity, these three are something which we need on a daily basis. You are attacked by the Chinese or Russians or a dime a dozen times in a day, and that's really very, very, very important. So we'll leave that for the question answer. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my teacher, my guru, General Bakshi, my senior from the Indian Army. Sir, we missed you all this while. The floor is yours. You have to make your presentation in, let's say, 10, 12 minutes, if that is okay, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Shekhar, it's so good to see you all, especially my friend Satoru Nagao, my dear Japanese friend. Let me now, at the outset, make a few very candid points. I love the candor with which my predecessor spoke, and I will carry that tradition forward. The simple fact is, India does not need any boots on the ground from anyone. You just come in the way, we'll take care of China. Let me show you this. We are a very young population. We are 1.4 billion. We have an average median age of 26. We are well placed to take on China and give it a hammering if required. I think I can't get more blunt than that. What the Quad is doing for us, and Satoru has been making this point very cogently, what the Quad has been doing for us is distributing China's military resources, so they cannot be focused on one particular target country at a time, right? Whatever be the median age, whatever be the median age of the Japanese or Australian, simple fact is the very fact of it being, they ensure that China has to look at Taiwan. China has to cater in a major way for the United States. China has to now cater for Japan. China has to cater for Australia. It cannot focus all its resources into Ladakh or Arunachal Pradesh. That is the greatest military value that I see of the Quad. The rest, I'm sorry, most of us in India find it a talk show. Because in terms of actual value, this is the greatest thing that they are putting to the table by just being in being, right? Now the second point that I would like to make is, we are trying to gain autarky and autonomy in weapon systems. Where we need our Japanese friend. This is where we would need the United States to help us with technology, right? And we are prepared to pay hard cash, like Pakistan or some other bigger countries. We are not asking for arms. We've got the means to pay, we are prepared to pay. But we are told that even if you want to pay, you can't buy F-35. They're prepared to give them to Japan, they're prepared to give them to Australia, to other countries, but not to India. The Russians loan us, give us a loan, nuclear submarine. Can we expect the same from the United States? No. But the fact of the matter is, my take is that United States and Australia are not part of Asia. India, Japan, Vietnam, South Korea, etc., all these South Asian countries have nowhere to go. We have to fight and die if necessary in Asia. So there needs to be an Asian focus of the Quad, wherein we try and rope in, all the nations which are now threatened by China. And I'm specifically across the board.
General Bakshi sir, your audio has broken completely.
इसका ऑडियो को क्या होगा? 1 second. यार 1 minute यार, I'm talking to Japan. चिल्लाओ और जोर से. As it is, मेरा ये चला गया है.
Sir, please speak without video. It will be clear, sir.
Okay. Shall I stop my video?
Yes, sir. Please make your remarks.
All right. So, as I was saying, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So, as I was saying, that we have seen the nuclear saber being rattled. Russia has been making outright threats of crossing the nuclear threshold at the tactical level or at the higher level. North Korea has been firing away with its missile. So now the fact of the matter is that India had signed a treaty of peace and friendship with the erstwhile Soviet Union. I have a radical proposal. Let us, India, sign a treaty of peace and friendship to start with Japan and Vietnam, two of the main counterweights to China in Asia, right? Two of the main counterweights to China in Asia. And we should say that because they are Buddhist countries, They are civilizationally our kin. We will not countenance any nuclear threat to them. And should nuclear threat arise, we will hold deal with that threat. I think that will go a long way in the security bond between the two countries. Japan makes excellent submarines. Our basic problem is engine of fighter aircraft. I think we need to cooperate with Japan more. Both of us are developing fifth generation fighters. Can't we pool our energy? Can't we look at Japanese submarines, Japanese minesweepers? Minesweepers is a major requirement. India and Japan can cooperate in the field of space. We can launch their satellites, space station, and pool and gains the reality so that we produce jointly. India has come up with the 155mm ATAC gun, which is better than the American. And as Russia-Ukraine war has shown, even 2 to 3 kilometers of plus range makes a difference. The Kalyani range of this gun fires 5 rounds a minute. The American guns fires 3. Can't India and Japan collaborate? India, Vietnam collaborate, South Korea. The Philippines have been asked for it.
So we have lost you again, General Bakshi, sir. General Bakshi, if you can hear me, you can leave and rejoin and see if it improves. I think we'll wait for a minute or so. And if it doesn't work, then we will start doing the discussion and deliberation. Is that okay?
Sure, sir.
Okay. I think it's a pity that we have lost General Bakshi's voice. And if Sunil, if it is okay, then we can start off with the Q&A.
Yes, sir, please.
Yes, sir.
Firstly, thank you very much, my very esteemed speakers, Dr. Nagao, Dr. Roger, and Dr. Amit Gupta, and partially General Bakshi. We all brought out few points on the table. Starting from the validity, how valid and how important is Indo-Pacific and Quad, going right up to General Bakshi's articulation that, it is all for shop talk. But yeah, it is a matter to be debated, that because in India, many of us see the Chinese threat on the land border we tend to see less of the maritime domain, which is an emerging sort of area in which the India's future actually lies on maritime sector. And 95% of our trade is through the seas, and ensuring that they are secured throughout, the sea lanes of communication are secure is important. And things don't happen in a jiffy. It takes time to build those capacities and capabilities. No one country can take care of the entire ocean. And I'm reminded of the statement made by then the CEO of the US Navy, Admiral Mike Mullen, while walking on the aircraft carrier deck on Virat. He had mentioned to me that he had said that the world requires 1,000-ship navy to secure this entire sea space. And if I'm not wrong, we still haven't hit all ships combined, including that of China in the world. So that is the extent of the vastness of the sea. That is the vastness of the challenge. And therefore, to imagine that security cooperation is not required, possibly it may be a little bit misplaced there. I see only one question in the chat box, and no, I think there are two. One I see straight away. Considering China's, have you got many questions?
Yeah, there are 3 questions in chat box, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just let me go up. Okay. Yeah. First one is from Om Ranjan.
Yes, sir.
Question on recent development inside Quad, that is IPEF, coming up. How do you see up these changes inside Quad that is coming up with one economic group with no clear rules and objective, and just seeing India as a market will undermine the wholesale idea of fighting with the Chinese belligerents on economic grounds? Dr. Nagao, could you take that on?
It's part of the answer is just a repeat of my presentation. Indeed, China's threat is threat of money. Why? Because China's rapid military modernization depends on ample budget. And this is very important how to deter China, because when we checked China's territorial expansion in the South China Sea, there is a pattern. When France withdrew from the Indochina Peninsula in 1950s, China take half of the Paracel Island. In the 1970s, when the US withdrew from Vietnam, China take another half of the Paracel Island. In 1970s, when Soviet Union troops reduced the number in Vietnam, China expanded 6 feet of the Spratly Island. And when US withdrew from Philippines in 1990s, China takes Mischief Reef in South China Sea. So when China finds the power vacuum, they try to steal it. So if we maintain military balance, we can deter China. In this case, what should I do? We need to maintain military balance by increasing defense budget. But from 2011 to 2020, China increased their military expenditure 76%, but the US decreased 10%. India increased 37%, it is better, but Japan increased only 2.4%. So how to catch up is very difficult. In this case, if Japan, India, US, Australia cooperate each other, we can divide China's defense budget multi-direction. But this is not enough. We need to reduce China's income. That is very important. That's why this military problem is related with economic problem. That's why we need to create a market, alternative market, to reduce China's income. In this case, Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, or TPP, or RCEP, we try to seek. RCEP is a very old idea, including India, Australia, or other regional countries to neutralize China's influence. But this market includes China. That's why China can increase their trade with this country and increase their influence towards other countries. That's why RCEP is not enough. RCEP is too old. But TPP is trying to create alternative market by cooperating with Vietnam, Australia, Canada, or the United States, of course. But US withdrew from this TPP, unfortunately. But this market try to neutralize China's influence by creating new market. But the US withdraw from this. Now TPP, Japan understand TPP is not enough because we need United States leadership. So now new idea has come, Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, which leadership is United States and excluding China and including India. TPP do not include India, but IPEF include India. So that's why this IPEF is most important now. So now we are negotiating to establish IPEF. So this means that this is only one step to achieve the goal. But as a one step, this is very important because all three conditions are fulfilled. That's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nagao. I think what he was asking was, there are no rules of the game which have been put on the table. And I would guess that it is work in progress and it will take a little bit of time. It has just been declared on 24th of May. Things don't happen very quickly when you have a cooperative arrangement of 13 countries in IPEF as of now. And I'm sure that's going to increase with time. That brings me to the second question from Simon Sangma. How does India-US strategic partnership contribute to its role in the Quad? Can I request both Dr. Roger and Amit to go one by one? Roger, you go first.
Sure, thank you. And, I would say with Dr. Gupta, his comments earlier, I really agree with a lot of what you said in terms of, how we're trying to frame the security dynamic and how we really need to focus on things like education exchanges and other opportunities in a way really of developing not just our own countries, but the region as a whole. And this gets to the issue raised in this question on the India-US strategic partnership and how does it contribute to the Quad. US-Indian dynamics, again, have been evolving over, and I look at it, when I look at American administrations, each likes to say they were the one that started it or they were the one that turned it around. But I think as all in this room know, it has been an evolving process. It's partially framed in how the US has engaged with Pakistan and Afghanistan. Let's look in the other direction. Those of us who can go back to the Cold War era, of course, remember US-Indian relations during the US-Soviet rivalry. And so there is some baggage here. There are some perception challenges that we both have coming into it. Now we're moving into, 21st century dynamics. It's a multipolar world. We're looking at, two of the large countries of the world finding ways to work with each other. And I do know that this strategic partnership focuses on things that are honestly the sorts of things that the US engages with when it comes to the Europeans, when it comes to Japan, South Korea, Israel, other states, which it's about trade, it's about technology, it's about cyber. It's, yes, we're talking about health diplomacy or health engagement. It's a multi-leveled form of security cooperation because we're broadening security beyond just arms sales, weapons sales, and training. And so I do see this as evolving, and I will say it will continue to have hiccups. India itself and South Asia broadly is becoming more important in the US. And not just for foreign affairs, but for domestic affairs. The domestic population, the voting population from this region, and I should be clear, the voting population from this region, which is well above the economic average in the US, education average in the US, etc., is becoming a critical force. And so issues related to the region are actually becoming part of campaigns here, electoral campaigns in the US. And so we're seeing this transition. So I go on and on about this to reemphasize that I do see this dynamic having an impact on the Quad. Go back to the comment made about this being the 3+1 versus the Quad. Perhaps this will help paper over or bring together, I should say, these differences, because absolutely right, the US, Japan, Australia do come from a certain frame different from India. But this US-India strategic partnership over time may help bring the US and India closer together where these differences aren't going to be so extreme. We're going to have these though, S-400s and other issues come up. We have to figure out a way to work through these and not have it, if you will, threaten or compromise broader dynamics. And I should say, take our attention off the bigger issues, which is this other neighbor in the region, the People's Republic of China, that wants to dictate or frame maritime issues, air and sea, or air and space issues, and even land borders to its favor. So I'll stop at that and turn it back to you.
Thank you, Roger. Dr. Amit Gupta, would you like to make some comment on that?
Sure. Look, again, if we go with this idea that the Quad has great potential, if you move it away from defense, then I can give you some good ideas. Idea number one, there are 1.4 billion Indians. Whoever gets the 1.4 billion Indians on 5G wins the battle for 5G in the world, which is why the Chinese were so desperate, which is why everybody else wants it. And this, again, I cannot figure out the Indian 5G plan. Maybe somebody can explain this to me someday. But let us say an India, a Japan, an Australia, and the United States thing will have a common 5G. Can you see what that does to world order? Just think about it, because that's the end of Huawei, ZTE, and all these other boys. Okay, so that would be my first, again, but it requires imagination, which I don't see much of. So that is one. Two, I completely agree with General Bakshi, who talks about conventional weaponry in Japan. The Japanese make the best conventional submarines now, the Tiger-class. They should be selling that to the Indians, because that Project 75I or whatever it's called, people seem to be dropping out of it every day. So bring the Japanese in and build a first-class submarine. There are other things you can, I've never understood what happened to the Shinmaiwa amphibious aircraft, which the Indian Navy was interested in. And for the record, Admiral Sinha, I will once again say, navies need submarines. I'm sorry, I know you're an aircraft carrier guy, but 50 submarines, 30 conventional, 20 nuclear, you would run the Indian Ocean. You know, the Americans wouldn't be needed there. The Americans could concentrate on the fun and games, which is East China Sea, South China Sea. And that would be the breaking up of the, security responsibilities in the Quad. Look, I'll say one more thing in this. In terms of strategic partnerships between India and the United States, we keep talking defense. There are 25 items on Make in India. Medical, education, hospitality, tourism, wellness. These are ones on which multiple American companies can work with with India, transfer technologies, and help build up the relationship. Because this, you don't want the sort of relationships the US has with military powerhouses, which are going to be in the Quad Plus. I refer to Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, which believes that it can now talk rudely to the Indians, with a population of 300,000, by the way, which makes them smaller than the Nehru Place area of New Delhi, where my mother lives. So the point I'm getting at here is, and oh, by the way, I'll add one more thing on this, just so that the audience knows this. The Saudis, great military warriors, had a 10-party coalition, which went in military coalition, which went into Yemen. The Yemenis fighting with AK-47s decimated them. There's now one country in that 10-party coalition. The other 9 have run away. So I wouldn't talk to these people about the Quad Plus because they're non-starters. But my point to you is, if you are India, stop talking like you're the Saudis or the UAE with the United States. Talk like a democracy which has technological aspirations, economic aspirations, to the United States, which completely understands that. Talk to US business and get away from this snobbery that the only thinking that happens in America is in Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. The Chinese are so smart, and let me bring it to the Chinese for a second. The Chinese are so smart that they've set up Confucius Institutes in all 50 states. I live in Alabama, which is one of the poorest and most backward states in America. We have 2 Confucius Institutes within 50 miles. And I've repeatedly said, why don't you build Gandhi Institutes in India? Because every other Indian politician is controversial, but Gandhi, everybody can agree on, is a decent bloke. So build Gandhi Institutes, teach Gandhian philosophy, teach Indian cooking, teach yoga, show Indian movies. You will create an audience for India. This would be my argument to you on the Quad. Move it away from security and you perform brilliantly. And I want to say one thing on the Chinese one. Look, the Chinese are winning this because they have ambition, they have vision, they have resources. And Satoru talked about this when he said the Chinese have money. So they have the ambition to build a BRI. And they're saying it'll be 1 trillion in investment, 8 trillion overall. Because once you build that, say, highway, you get hospitals, schools, etc. along it. So you need to be able to counter that with a real vision. That would be my first serious argument there on this. Second thing is what my Australian friend Hugh White points out. He says, everybody admires China, nobody wants to be China. Yeah. Everybody admires the United States, everybody wants to be the United States. Dr. Nagao, I should tell you this. I grew up watching Godzilla and Shinojin no Samurai. Okay, so you know what I feel about Japan. And if you don't know, if you're too young to know what Shinojin no Samurai is, it is the 7 Samurai movie by Akira Kurosawa. Okay, or Kurosawa Akira, depending on which way you want to put it. You have a great culture. We all love it. You know, one day I want to go to Japan and learn how to do bonsai and kendo stick fighting. Now, to get back to the point here, why is it that we can't bring all this huge cultural capability that the Quad members have to compete with the Chinese? That would, because remember why the United States won the Cold War. It wasn't because it built more nuclear weapons than the Russians. The Russians are very good at building nuclear weapons. It wasn't just the economic aspect. It was the Americans provided an alternative cultural, social vision for the world. And that is what everybody agreed to. You know, this bullshit about the liberal international order, which only 20 countries in the world are part of, by the way, and there are 211 in FIFA, only 20 of them fall in. In South America, for instance, only Uruguay and Chile fall in it. But what I'm trying to tell you is liberal international order is not based on regimes and free trade. It is based on the idea of liberal, which means the progression of individual rights. And that is not coming from China. That still comes from democracies. So why not give this kind of alternative to people and see where they go with it? Because I think the Quad wins then. But if you want to do stupid things like do naval exercise in the East China Sea, the Chinese will hammer you with missiles. And, you know, figure out how many ships you can lose. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amit Gupta. And I think that also addresses the next question, which has been asked by Mr. Vinayak. He says that considering China's issues in non-traditional domain, shouldn't Quad focus on strengthening these aspects of the regional countries rather than posing itself as a counterweight? And Paran, absolutely right. And that is exactly what has been spoken both by Dr. Roger and Dr. Amit Gupta. We do tend to look at, these cooperative mechanisms more in the prism of security and less in the other aspects of human development. And I think it is time for all of us, the Quad partners, to look at it, and particularly India. It's a big lesson here that rather than pushing only for the fighter aircraft and submarines, etc., which will happen, the other aspects which which was just brought out, I think we need to pay some attention, more attention on those to make it a little more strong bond, and many people to follow, because everybody is not a security czar. They're all people, human beings, basically. So I think human development is important. Coming to next one, asked by Mr. Roshan on the Facebook, do you think BIMSTEC countries can benefit from Quad? 1 minute, let me see. What benefits will Quad bring to BIMSTEC? Dr. Nagao, would you like to take this on? It's a BIMSTEC question.
Yes, for example, how to counter the BRI? In this case, there are plenty of the benefit for the recipients of the BRI indeed. Indeed, what happened in the past in the Bangladesh is one of the good example. When China suggests the Sonadia port project, Japan suggests Bangladesh, the Matabari port project, very near from the Sonadia port project. Because Japan knows that this is dangerous project for Bangladesh. That's why Bangladesh can check the detail of the two projects, the Sonadia port project from China and the Matabari port project from Japan, and check it. And finally, they decide to accept the Matabari port project instead of the Sonadia port project. So Japan's project won the competition in this case. But why this is important? When Sri Lanka accepts the Hambantota port project with high interest rate, there was no alternative choice for Sri Lanka. That time, the Sri Lanka was just after the civil war, and there are plenty of the rumors related with the war crime. That's why many countries hesitate to invest Sri Lanka. And China was the only country to suggest such kind of infrastructure project. But after that, Sri Lanka realized it. This project creates huge debt, and Sri Lanka cannot return. Sri Lanka needs 400 years to return. So after that, Sri Lanka needs to give to China the right to control the Hambantota port for 99 years. 99 means that in Chinese, this is forever. So that's why this is one kind of colonialization. This is new empire. So that's why Japan's alternative project is helping the Bangladesh in the, by suggesting the Matabari port project. Japan tried to suggest alternative project. Bangladesh can choose it. So if the Quad country cooperate in the infrastructure project, indeed they have already started to talk about it. And in this case, the recipient can get the benefit because recipient can get the alternative suggestion. They can check. That's why the BIMSTEC also get the benefit from the Quad cooperation. Quad is a group of influential countries, which means that impact is relatively big. Any framework in this region can get a benefit if Quad succeeded. That's my answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nagao. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. Yeah, I think there are none. Have I missed out anything?
There is one more question, sir. Here. How is the Russia-Ukraine conflict going to impact Quad?
Well, Dr. Gupta, I think you raised your hand. May like to take on this. Yeah.
Look, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, I just came back from Europe. I came back from Holland. I still call it Holland. Who cares what they call it? And Portugal. And what was interesting was there was a lot of big talk about remilitarization, fighting the Russians. But do you know what I found in that? The Dutch thought fighting the Russians was standing in Nijmegen, which is on the Dutch-German border. The Portuguese thought it was standing in Lisbon or in Braga and fighting them. Father Putin is not coming that far. When I changed it, and I mean, I'm tired of doing this. I really don't understand. I call Europe the world's largest open-air museum, by the way. It's the fact of the matter is this. When you tell the Europeans, are you willing to go and fight on the Polish border and enter Russian soil? All these young people suddenly go silent. They have no interest or desire. And do keep this in mind, that all this talk of militarization that the Europeans are talking about, it can only come by doing two things, raising taxes or lowering social expenditures. And the Europeans do not have the guts to raise taxes. They do not have the guts to cut social expenditures. And Britain is the lead in this. Boris Johnson likes to talk a lot. Boris Johnson promised to revive the national healthcare system and build the rail infrastructure. Where is the money going to come from if you have to spend it on defense? And remember that they are so bankrupt that they're putting Royal Air Force aircraft on that Queen Elizabeth or whatever they call their new aircraft carrier. because they don't have enough fighter jets. Now, the United States Navy would never go begging the United States Air Force for aircraft to put on its aircraft carriers. The Indian Navy would never go begging the Indian Air Force for aircraft to put on its carriers. Europe lacks the ability. Don't talk about it in the Indo-Pacific. It's a waste of time. So how does Ukraine apply to the rest of the world? And I think here's the thing. Unfortunately, what it's done is it's taken away the attention which was on the Indo-Pacific and brought it once back to yet another stupid war in Europe. And let's be very clear about this. Azov Battalion is a bunch of neo-Nazis. There's an article in 2016 in Foreign Policy which says that. Now they're heroes. 6 years later, neo-Nazis are now patriots. I don't understand. It's a good thing I read George Orwell in college. What this has done is this has made a huge American commitment to Europe. And I'm not sure where the money is going to come from to then put it into the Indo-Pacific. And I'll end by saying one thing on this, which you all need to realize. The American defense budget for the next year is $813 billion. But the American Veterans Administration budget is $300 billion. That is pensions plus healthcare. And just to give all the military people in Roger this idea, in 2018, 5 years ago, the Veterans Administration budget was $190 billion. It has gone up to $300 billion. $300 billion means a 10% increase every year. Now, I know a little bit about budgeting and things like that. No budget on the planet increases at 10% a year. And the feeling now is that all this Afghanistan, Iraq crowd, as they get older and get more and more seriously ill, this may go up to $500 billion. Where is the US going to pay for all this from? You know, and this is the problem. Ukraine has been a terrible war for the international order because it has basically made it clear that we're going to be stuck in a mess in Europe for the next 10 years. And I guarantee you, I'll end with this statement. After it's over, because it will be, eventually Father Putin will get tired and bored. After it's over, the Chinese will go and say, our Ukrainian brothers, we will help rebuild your country as part of BRI. And the Ukrainians will take the money because I guarantee you nobody in Europe or in Washington, DC is going to fork out $500 billion for Ukraine to be rebuilt, or in Japan for that matter. So that is the sad part of this. The West is fighting Russia to the last Ukrainian. The Russians are going to take 30% of Ukraine, maybe more, and they won't give it back. Putin doesn't strike me as being, I take land to bargain. You know? So in the Indian Ocean, the winners are the Chinese out of this. And it is so sad that this happened because the Trump administration and the Biden administration were both focused on Indo-Pacific, countering China. Now you have to split your energy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Amit. Roger, can you go next? I think after this we'll wrap up probably.
Okay, just, yeah, very briefly, because I'll have to say, you know, I echo a fair amount of what Dr. Gupta said. It really is about the attention. You know, again, if we look at where the US could put its energy, resources, and money, it is now compromising that by having to help, you know, this effort in Ukraine. It's not just dollars, it's also personnel. You know, staff members in various government offices, you know, have to now spend their days looking at this conflict, which, by the way, you know, again, I call it a meaningless war. You know, it was a war of choice. Mr. Putin wanted to invade Ukraine. He did it. You know, there was no other hidden hand or other cause. But the question now is, how do countries resolve this? I agree that this is something that's going to go on for a while. You know, we look at conflicts around the world, whether we think of Bosnia in the 90s, you know, the Afghan conflict, what's happening in Syria, Yemen, conflicts which we think will be short victorious wars end up dragging on for years, if not more. And so the question is how to limit the damage of this. And I do worry that the ultimate victor is the People's Republic of China. They can come in as an economic savior. They're also going to create a situation where Russia's their junior partner. A Russia that's been decimated. And let's be clear, its military has performed poorly. Many of its elite forces are now dead. And interestingly, clearly not of concern to Russia, that has no problem leaving its dead on the battlefield and not doing anything about them or even informing their family members of this. And so, you know, what's left of the Russian military will be able to maintain and manage the occupied territories of Ukraine and perhaps further territories. We'll see yet another frozen conflict in Eurasia, but ultimately an isolated and weakened Russia. You know, Russian energy reserves and supplies going to Europe are going to decrease, and Russia will be a pariah in the international community for a long time, at least through the Putin years, which could go on for, you know, quite some time. And so, you know, when we look at this reshaped world, who can come in to help them? Well, again, it's their senior partner, China, that will readily do this. And so expect to see a changed security dynamic in Eurasia, where China's the dominant actor, Russia is the subordinate junior partner, and other countries are now looking at ways to manage this. And sort of as a final comment, to note that whether we look at Quad, whether we look at BIMSTEC, whether we look at what ASEAN can and cannot do, or other security organizations, the question is, will other countries put effort and energy into these, whether it's, and I would say particularly in the economic, educational, cultural, other spaces, not just military. If that can be done, the sort of objectives of countries like India, the United States, Japan, Australia can actually be realized, where we have a more open region. But boy, do we see a lot of hurdles and obstacles ahead that need to be addressed effectively. So, you know, on that note, the microphone is back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Roger. I think that was very, very, very thoughtful and really well spoken. Just coming back as a sum up, coming back to Dr. Nagao, the point that you addressed regarding BIMSTEC. If you look at the individual countries of BIMSTEC, they all have some kind of bilateral or trilateral organizations, relations with the countries of Quad. All that is required possibly, or let it function in a manner as long as this entire area develops. It is the poorest part of the world. So if it develops, it's fine. It doesn't matter whether it is in a Quad forum or it is in a bilateral forum. Idea is to bring development, particularly human development, in these areas. And I think that I will very much go along with all the sentiments of our panelists, that it is time to be addressing more of human development aspects rather than going completely spending too much money on the military aspect, because yes, now you have to protect whether you want to live in a free world, in a democratic world, or would you like to go into a sort of single party and autocratic system. And the countries that we are talking about, we are the people who like to express ourselves, we like our freedom, we like our liberty. And if those things have to be protected, my guess is as good as anybody else's, that it is the human development aspects which will actually make difference at the end of all this. All that remains for me is to thank my very distinguished panelists, Dr. Nagao, Dr. Roger, Dr. Amit Gupta, and General Bakshi, who's not there. It's really, all of them are my very good friends. I have known them for years. I've heard them. Amit, of course, only recently, but I'm sure that I will get to hear him and possibly, meet him someday. So thank you very much, and my big appreciation and kudos to all of you for taking out your time and doing this. Back to you, Sunil.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, here we come to the end of the discussion. It has been such an honor to be the part of this wonderful event. I, on behalf of NICE, would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed guest and Chair, Admiral Shekhar Sinha, Dr. Satoru Nagao, Major General G.D. Bakshi, Dr. Roger Kangas, and Dr. Amit Gupta for their insightful presentation and remarks. We are truly honored to have you with us at today's event at short notice. We wanted to have an Australian as well as a female speaker, but unfortunately we could not get their confirmation. So we promised to get them in future. A big round of applause and thanks also goes to all the participants who made the event a memorable one. We hope to have you all again in future. Thank you and good night.